At such moments, I almost always remember my time in the desert. I suppose this is quite reasonable, considering that I am looking at my target through the scope. Only now my goal is not to be a terrorist or even a criminal. In fact, in this case, I am the criminal. My target is a balding, sweaty, slightly overweight banker who at this very moment is plowing the field of one of his subordinates from the bank. Why is he in my sights? Well, because I have a contract to end his life. Someone, and I have no idea who, ordered this man's murder. They paid with cryptocurrency, and everything was organized through the dark net. I will never meet the person who placed the order, and I have no ties to either the target or his lover. By the time law enforcement receives the alarm, I will no longer be there, and I am very careful not to leave any traces that could point to me. I watch through the scope for a while longer. I'm not a voyeur, but I need to find an opportunity to shoot. For various reasons, I can't shoot while they're in, as they say, but usually when a guy is done, he either rolls over on the bed or stands up. As a rule, this is a signal for me. I adjusted my scope a little, looking at the part of the room that I could see through the window. There was no one except the copulating couple. I looked at her. She's a good prize. The contract states that no harm will come to her and she will not suffer. At least physically. I can't predict how watching her lover's head explode as he goes to the bathroom to take a leak will affect her psyche. I looked around for a second. You shouldn't become so focused on a goal that you end up in danger yourself. I have no observer, no cover. It's just me here, so I have to make sure my position is secure. And that's true. I'm on the roof of a building across the street from the hotel where the cheater lives. I return to the scope and see that it is close to completion. I adjust myself again, check that nothing has changed in the conditions, and at this moment he arches his back, shouting out his climax. He shudders once, twice, 3 times, and freezes. Then he gets off her. As expected, he heads to the bathroom. I pull the trigger. I'm gone before she even starts screaming, and by the time law enforcement gets there, I'm already miles away. I put my gear in one of several storage units I have around town, each under a different name and prepaid in cash, before heading home. During the trip, I again reflected on how I ended up here. How did it happen that I am now a killer, specializing almost exclusively in eliminating cheating spouses? Well, when it comes to shooting, everything is simple. I've always been good with a rifle. From an early age hunting on a farm, I developed an affinity for guns, especially rifles, which meant I could make shots that would kill everyone else. It's almost instinctive. When I enlisted in the Marines and then in sniper school, we were taught all kinds of trajectories, wind resistance, ballistics, and other sciences. I learned all this, but I just didn't need it. I can make a shot by eye that many snipers cannot do even with all their calculations and computers. It is simply a natural instinctive ability. There is no doubt that I would have achieved great success in the Marine Corps, but then something happened that changed my life forever and is the reason I began to specialize in cheating spouses. You already guessed it, cheating spouse. Gabrielle is a girl of French origin, a petite, dark-haired woman whom we met in a bar in the city while on vacation. She is lively and attractive, and her body evokes all sorts of unclean thoughts. She spent the entire evening with us, and my best friend Bobby and I took turns dancing with her. By the end of the evening, it was obvious that there was something between her and Bobby, and with a bitter smile, I did the only thing a best friend could do. I wished him luck and returned to base alone. After that, every time they went to the city, they were inseparable. I would either start the evening as a third wheel, trying to find my own company as the evening progressed, or sometimes she would bring a friend to keep me company while she and Bobby had fun with each other. I was surprised when, after 3 months of dating, Bobby came to me to show me the ring he had bought for her. "Wow, Bobby," I said, "that's a rock. Are you sure you're ready for this?" He chuckled. "When you know," he said, taking the pose of an old sage. "I won't let her leave." The look she gave when Bobby got down on one knee at the bar that night gave me pause. I expected her to be excited and happy, but a look of calculation flashed across her face before she showed the expected emotions. I didn't say anything to Bobby because I didn't want to ruin his moment. but I was curious. I organized the bachelor party as I was best man, and although those are my words, it was epic. All the ingredients were there. All three components were present, friends, half the platoon was locked in, alcohol. We had to put Bobby back in his bunk that evening, and he remembered almost nothing about what happened there. And the girls. Of course, there were also dancers. It is necessary. However, I tried to protect Bobby's virtue and saw to it that nothing untoward happened to him. When I organized the party, I talked to Gabrielle beforehand to find out her boundaries. If she had said no dancers, there wouldn't have been any. I didn't want Bobby to get divorced before we got married. The wedding was small. Her parents, a few of her friends, and a few guys from our platoon. I was, as I already said, the best man. 2 months later, we were again sent to the desert for 3 months of service. I will remember that patrol for the rest of my life. We were instructed to search a village where, according to our information, the rebels could be located. My spotter and I had already scouted and found a place where I could provide surveillance for the guys. The situation wasn't ideal, as I still couldn't see some places. But this was the best option. Bobby had been out of sorts all day, seemed overly anxious to get there, and was abrupt with everyone, even me, which was unusual. When I asked him what the problem was, he just grinned and said he was just itching to get going. Bobby never returned from that patrol. I didn't see what happened since his position was out of sight from my vantage point, but his team said that when they made contact with the enemy, Bobby stood up, shouted something like, "Go, you bastards!" and rushed towards them, firing from the hip with his M16 like some gangster James Cagney. He didn't even run 3 meters. As his best friend, I was tasked with collecting his things to send to the USA, and that's when I found the letter. Dear Bobby, I know this is the coward's way, but I need to tell you that I dated someone else, and we fell in love. I'm leaving you so that he and I can be together. I want you to know that I really loved you, but the time spent apart showed that I am not truly in love with you, and you deserve more. So it will be better if we break up, and you can find someone who will love you as much as you deserve. Please don't think too badly of me. John says you still have a month left on tour, so by the time you get back, I'll be moving out of our house. I'm not going to demand anything from you during the divorce, and I will be glad to consider you a friend if you find the strength in your heart to forgive me. Best wishes, Gabriel. Damn bitch, I shouted after reading the letter. Now I understood Bobby's behavior and decided that retribution must come. I was tasked with escorting Bobby's body back to the US, which interrupted my tour. We unloaded the coffin and Gabrielle came up to him, tears streaming down her face. She put her hand on the coffin and I said, "Don't you dare! You betrayed him." She stepped back, stunned, and then I noticed the officer accompanying her, Colonel John Edwards. "What the heck?" he began, hugging her shoulders. "How dare you?" "How dare I?" said. "This treacherous woman planted a Dear John letter on an active duty soldier right before a patrol. What did she think would happen when I find out who this worthless scum she's with?" "Stand by, Marine," Colonel Edwards growled. "I didn't know she sent him a letter. I told her to wait and we—" "You?" I asked incredulously. "Have you met the wife of one of your subordinates?" "It's just—" he began. My first blow hit him in the throat, bringing him to his knees. A kick to the groin knocked him to the ground, and I kicked him 4 more times in the face, while he was on the ground, before the cops got to me. My greatest satisfaction was that we were both sentenced to court-martial. Him, for inappropriate behavior, and me, for hitting a senior in rank. I spent a year in military prison for assault, after which I was dishonorably discharged, and he was simply kicked out of the service, deprived of his pension. It took me another year to find her. She had moved to Canada and was living with a French-Canadian businessman. I had no idea what happened to Colonel Edwards. He got lost along the way. I thought about just shooting her from a distance. It's so simple. No security, no surveillance, a simple woman in public, like catching fish in a barrel, but then she would never know what killed her and why. I needed it to be more personal. I needed her to understand who killed her and why. She made everything easy for me in the end. She was at a dance with her friends. Apparently, she was still cheating because the guy who was currently running his tongue down her throat was not her French-Canadian businessman. I watched from the bar as he whispered something in her ear. She nodded, and they moved towards the exit. I walked out the front door and walked around the bar. I guessed where they were going, and was not disappointed when I saw that they were heading towards the SUV in the parking lot. I waited by my car to see if they were going to go somewhere, but when he opened the back door of the SUV, I knew it was going to be here and now. Looking around to see if there was anyone or anyone watching, I moved closer until I saw Gabrielle, or rather Gabrielle's ass, sticking out the back door and the guy behind her. I didn't want to kill the guy, I have no claims against him, so I quickly strangled him, and he fell unconscious on the floor. It took Gabrielle a few seconds to realize that the shaking had stopped. She climbed out of the car and turned to face me, looking down the barrel of my Glock 9. Her eyes widened as she recognized me, and she opened her mouth to speak. I got ahead of her. "Bobby says hi, bitch." I pulled the trigger twice, putting 2 bullets in her chest, and she was thrown back into the car. I disappeared before the gunshots reached the bar and was back across the border into the United States less than 4 hours later. Revenge for Bobby gave me an idea. Surely there are a number of people who are being cheated on at this moment. Some of them will want to reconcile, others will want to divorce. But there will be those who want to find a more permanent solution to the problem of a cheating spouse, and I have all the necessary skills to make it happen. And so I became a hitman, specifically one who attacks those outside the confines of their marriage. This is an easy job. In general, these are ordinary people. They practically do not know that they are a target and have no personal protection. I had been practicing my craft for about 4 years and was making quite a lot of money when I met Juliana. Juliana is the finance manager at the car dealership I visited when I wanted to buy a new car. She is a bright, smart, and interesting conversationalist. It didn't hurt that she was almost 5 feet tall in heels, with legs that went on for miles, long jet black hair, and an ass to die for. We instantly hit it off, and within half an hour she agreed to go on a date with me. I won't bore you with the courtship dances, but suffice it to say that a year and a half later, Juliana and I were married in a big wedding with over 200 guests, consisting of her friends and family, my parents, and a few of my old sailing buddies still in touch with me. To the world and to Juliana, I was a successful financial manager, managing money, spending most of my working time on a computer at home, but regularly traveling around the country when necessary. This is the perfect cover for my real job. Life with Juliana was good. She supported my money management work even when I had to travel on business. She always welcomed my return with bedroom sessions where she was wild and uninhibited. Even when I was at home, we had sex at least 4 to 5 times a week, and sometimes much more often. She never went with the girls, although she had many friends. We always went together. If we went to a dance, she accepted, with my blessing, invitations to dance from other men, but always ensured that their behavior, like hers, met her husband's requirements. I never doubted that she loved me, just as I loved her. The contracts came through the dark web, and accepting them made me paranoid. Never met in person, dealt only online, required irrefutable proof of infidelity, and they never knew when or where the contract would be executed. The money was transferred to a virtual account with a ban and was released only after the contract was completed. The money could be returned by me to the client if for some reason I could not fulfill the contract, but so far this has not happened. Since I had no connections to any of the victims, law enforcement never approached me. And since I used cryptocurrency, even if it could be proven that the person who entered into the contract paid the lump sum, its whereabouts were completely unknown. Security. I have killed far more men than women, by a ratio of about 10 to 1. When a man cheats on a woman, she wants him dead. And when a woman cheats on a man, he most often wishes for the death of the person she cheated on him with. Of course, there were exceptions. But I have no conscience. This is work. People are willing to pay me, and pay me well, for my services. And cheaters deserve everything they get. So life went on. After 3 years of marriage, Juliana and I had our first child, followed by our second, just 18 months later. They grew up in a good, stable family and are now both attending fully paid college. Juliana was feeling a bit of an empty nest and returned to work at the car dealership. I worked from home most of the day, with occasional trips. I decided that I would retire. 1 or 2 more contracts will complete the pension fund I've been building, and frankly, I'm tired of the game. I looked at the job board I used to look for work and saw that there were 2 available contracts. One is in a neighboring state, and the other is on the other side of the country. I decided that paying out a local contract would get me out of the business, and I clicked on the jobs to begin the process of getting a contract. The target was a man named Peter Miller. Attached is a photograph. The file states that he is a salesman for group insurance that covers 3 states, including ours, and that he travels extensively throughout his area. He is married to Janine, and they have 3 young children, Paul, Mary, and Siobhan. I have private investigator reports showing him having affairs with 4 different women. He is currently on the road, and his route has brought him within 50 miles of where I live. He is going to stay at a hotel for a week. There is no information that he has a woman, but it is assumed that he has one and that they will date during his stay. The contract provides for surveillance of his hotel, and if he appears with a woman who is not his wife, then to monitor him constantly. Attached to the contract were photographs of the man himself, his wife, and 3 children. I always wonder why photographs of children are included, but they are always included. Whoever compiled the dossier did a good job. It was known not only which hotel he was staying at, but also which room. I Googled the hotel and found that the room he booked was on the 5th floor on the east side. A quick glance at Google Earth showed that, although not just down the block, there was construction going on just down the block. If I can get to a high enough floor of this unfinished building, I will have an unobstructed view of the east side of the hotel, since the buildings directly opposite the hotel are only 3 stories high. I have to go on a business trip next week, I told Juliana on Friday evening. I will leave on Monday morning and return on Thursday. Perhaps Friday. She looked up from the book she was reading. I thought you were done with them already, she said. Without complaining, I just asked. This could be the last, depending on how things go. Maybe there will be another one if this one doesn't live up to expectations. She nodded, then grinned. That means we'll have the whole weekend together, she said. We didn't spend the whole weekend in bed. After a fabulous Friday night, we went out on Saturday, did a few mundane things, and then had dinner at our favorite restaurant. We spent Saturday evening and most of Sunday in bed. On Monday morning, I left the house and drove to the airport by car. After parking, I walked about a mile to a nearby warehouse and climbed into an inconspicuous car that I kept there for this purpose. This is a gray Toyota sedan that is immediately forgettable. She registered on a fake ID, which was strong enough to pass police checks, but wouldn't stand up to much scrutiny. I was in position on the 7th floor of a construction site, aiming at his window when the target entered the room. He fumbled for a few minutes and then picked up the phone, obviously making a call. After a short conversation, he left the room. It was a little after 12 o'clock in the afternoon. I did not pursue him. I knew that he would return, and I settled down to wait. For some reason, the construction site was closed, so I was not afraid of being discovered. When he returned to his room, it was already after 6 in the evening. In an obvious haste, he went to the bathroom to take a shower. I watched him as he walked back to the bedroom, nothing out of the ordinary. The water in the shower must have been cold because there wasn't much visible between his legs, and his body, although thin, wasn't particularly inspiring. I often wondered what attracted women to such men, and decided that he must have a good tongue in chat because it was definitely not his physical characteristics. After another 30 minutes, he got dressed and left. I ate and sat down to wait for his return. I was sure that he would return, and probably with some woman. I'll take a photo to prove his infidelity, and then I'll put a bullet in his skull. The contract doesn't say anything about killing or sparing the woman, so I won't kill her. Although I don't mind killing cheaters, I didn't know that this woman was a cheater. Maybe she's just a lonely girl who fell for this idiot. I have no information and she will remain alive. It was already past midnight when the lights in the room finally came on again, and I looked through the scope again. I saw my target enter the room with a tall, dark-haired woman. As soon as they walked through the door, the woman pinned him against the door and fell to her knees in front of him. I couldn't see what exactly was going on since her back was to me, and I could see him from the torso down due to my position a couple of floors above them, but I wasn't worried. Eventually, they will move further into the room. Still locked together, they began to remove the remains of their clothes, moving towards the bed. When they reached the bed, she was left in her underwear and he was naked. He pushed her back onto the bed and started kissing her body. From this angle, I could only see the tops of both of them, but then she tilted her head back and I moved my aim to look at her face. At that moment, it took all my self-control not to pull the trigger. Instead, I clicked on the camera that was linked to my scope and took a digital photo. Over the next 3 hours, I took photos and videos of the couple as they had sex in the bedroom. They even did this by the window, with the blinds open and the lights on, so they could easily be seen from the street, but they didn't seem to care. Finally, having had their fill, they went to bed for one last session of lovemaking before falling asleep for the night. When the lights went out, I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding and my thoughts racing. I opened the photo on my phone that I had taken first through the scope and looked at it. The woman arched her back, her eyes wide open. I zoomed in on that face, looking into those eyes, those beautiful eyes, the eyes of my wife, Juliana. Thoughts were racing through my head. I couldn't complete the murder right now. One of the safest things about what I did was that I was not involved with the victims or their partners. If I kill one or both of them now, the first person the police want to talk to will be me. My alibi won't stand up to that scrutiny. Besides, I'm not in a position to decide what to do with Juliana. Now I am so angry that I could have put a bullet in her without thinking. But I knew that the anger would pass, and I need to think not only about myself, but also about my children. I have to think long and hard about what to do with her. I will have to live with my decision for the rest of my life. Another thought was that if I returned the contract, someone else might pick it up and be less picky about whether or not to kill the asshole's partner. I also had to think about whether this was a setup. Did someone set it up for me to see my wife cheating with this idiot to try and screw me over? I didn't think it was law enforcement. They wouldn't put any of them on my radar because, for all they know, I could shoot tonight. But there might be someone else involved. Maybe someone then connected to one of my previous contracts who wants revenge. No, I need to fulfill this contract, but make it look random or natural. No follow-up from the police so we don't get hurt. I'll deal with Juliana later. I collected all my things and took them to the storage room. I won't use them for this job. While I was in storage, I picked up a few extra electronic items, and when I returned to the hotel, I found both of their cars and installed a GPS tracker on them. The next morning, after they both left, Juliana returned to my house, and he went to do what he was supposed to do here. I entered the hotel and, using the electronic keycard, entered his room. I searched the room, finding nothing unexpected. In his luggage were several blood pressure medications and some Viagra. Then I installed several hidden cameras. I have 4 days to complete the contract. Since I told Juliana I wouldn't be back until Thursday or Friday, I didn't need to communicate with her too much, although I knew she would call me today. I also booked a hotel room using my fake ID. Everything will be easier if I stay in the hotel legally. I looked around and found that surveillance cameras were installed only at the entrance and in the elevators. There are none on the stairs or in the corridors near the rooms. During the day, I watched their movements while making my preparations. Juliana was at work, then went to the gym, then returned home. After a while, his tracker showed that he was heading towards my house, and I swore to myself that if she let this asshole into my house, I would kill them both on principle and not care about the consequences. Luckily, He didn't come within 5 blocks of my house. Just after 6 in the evening, Juliana called me. "Hey, baby," she said. "Hi, honey. I missed you last night. I thought you'd call." "Sorry, I fell asleep in front of the TV, and when I woke up, it was already late," she said without the slightest pause. "I thought so. That's why I didn't bother you," I said, clenching my fist. This was the first time Juliana lied to me. Obviously, there were others, but I just didn't know about them. "How are things going with your meeting?" she asked. "An unexpected complication has arisen. Someone showed up unexpectedly at the meeting, and this raised some questions. I am confident that I will be able to close the deal, but it may take a little longer and be a little more difficult. However, once everything is done, I will no longer go on business trips," I said. "So you'll be back on Friday, not Thursday?" I could swear I heard a smile in her voice. "You don't seem too disappointed," I replied rather caustically. "Oh, no, not at all. I was just glad when you said that this was your last business trip. If an extra day on this one means it's the last, then it's worth it," she said. "So, what are you doing tonight?" "I just got back from the gym, so I'm going to lie in front of the TV," she said, "and go to bed early. I also need to work." "Well, remember what Mom always told me," I joked. "If you're not in bed by 11, you have to go home." She laughed. "I'll call you tomorrow evening. I miss you. Good night." I don't know if she noticed that I just hung up without saying anything further. The last call was to my friend. He is a chemist, and sometimes supplies me when my preferred method of killing does not work. Sometimes people want things to look more natural. Usually, this increases the price, but in this case, I'm willing to take a loss. By the time I got back to the hotel after seeing my friend, the asshole was already back. And when I connected to the camera, I heard his phone ringing. "Hi, Jules," I heard him say and winced. Juliana hated it when her name was shortened in any way. If it was her and she allowed him to call her Jules, that only made things worse. It's strange that little things like that matter. The conversation continued. "No, I came back late. Give me an hour to get ready and I'll meet you downstairs. Say at 7:30. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Tonight I'll make you squeal. I'll make you forget that poor asshole you married," he said with glee. "No, no, Juliana," he said. "I didn't mean to. I know he didn't. Don't, baby. Please. Julie." He looked at his phone. "Crap," he shouted fiercely. I smiled darkly to myself. It sounded like he was losing a night of passion. My phone rang. It was Juliana. "Hi, baby. How are you?" I asked in surprise. "Nothing," she said. "I just remembered that I didn't say I love you when we talked. And I just wanted to make sure you knew that." She sounded slightly upset. "Are you okay?" I asked. "You're saying something wrong?" "I'm fine," she replied. "I just miss you, that's all." I heard her phone beep, letting me know there was a call. I looked at my computer and saw that the goat was talking on his phone and guessed that it was he calling her. "Why don't we chat a little then?" I said. "It will be almost as if I was there." I waited to see what decision she would make. Continue talking to me or go back to talking to the jerk so he can charm her into another night of sex. She made the wrong decision. "No, I'm just stupid. Listen, my mom is trying to call me. I just wanted to say that I love you. Good night." The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. "Good night, Jules." I hung up. I wonder if she noticed. Back in the asshole's room, I heard his phone ring, and he smiled as he picked it up. "Hi, baby." "Yes, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. I know you don't like it when I say bad things about him. It's all just my insecurity. I just want to be a better lover to you and know that I make you feel as good as you make me feel. No, I will not." "Okay, tomorrow then. How about I invite you to dinner at Archie's? Shall I reserve a table for 7? Yes, I know. I'm sorry it happened like that. Yes, I love you too, Juliana. Good night." I love you too, I thought. This means that she confessed her love to him. Was this just a reflexive way to end the conversation, or did she actually love this asshole? I'll find out tomorrow. Soon after, I heard him call room service and order food and a couple of beers. I decided it was time to make my move. I waited for the food to be brought to my room and for the hotel employee to leave. Just as he sat down to eat, I knocked on his door. I stood to the side so that he wouldn't see me through the peephole, but I don't think he even looked. He opened the door and looked at me. The surprise on his face as he stared down the barrel of my silenced Glock was priceless. "Good evening, Peter," I said affably. "Can I come in?" For a moment his mouth worked silently, but I moved forward and he instinctively retreated. The door closed behind me. "What do you need?" he asked. "I have about $500 in my wallet. You can take it and—" "Nothing so rude," I said. "I just want to have a nice chat, in a friendly way. You see, my employer, I think you know her, this is your wife Janine, asked me for some answers. And you, my wonderful friend, will give them to me. I already have a lot of information, but there are also gaps to fill, so if you lie to me, I will find out and shoot you." He turned pale. "I actually don't want to shoot you," I continued. "It sounds like hard work, and your good wife would rather just divorce you and humiliate you. Financially, you're worth more to her alive than dead, and she thinks your kids will miss you if you die, but she wants to know the whole truth about your dirty deeds. Make no mistake, she will stalk every single one of the women you cheat with and tell their husbands what they've been up to. If you tell me everything completely and right now, I will leave this room without having to clean up your corpse. Sounds reasonable?" I took a bottle of beer, uncorked the cap, and handed it to him. While I uncorked the second one and took a sip, I became gloomy. "Is this the best thing they do here?" I asked. He looked at me, hope flashing in his eyes. "So, if I tell you everything you want to know, you won't shoot me?" he asked. "I won't shoot you. I'll leave and let you get on with your life. I would suggest that you call your wife after I leave, and maybe, if you humiliate yourself enough, she might even take you back, if only for the sake of your children." I pointed to one of the chairs. He sat down. "What do you want to know?" he asked. "There are 4 women about whom I know almost everything I need." I listed their names and places where they live. His mouth opened. "I also know that one. Woman lives here in the city. I think her name is Juliana and she works at a car dealership." He nodded. "Your wife doesn't know much about her, so let's start with her. Tell me everything about Juliana, how you met, how long you had sex with her, everything." He started slowly, but told his story while sipping the bottle of beer I handed him. He met Juliana about 4 months ago. I visited a car dealership where I sold my insurance and talked to her as a financial officer. She is beautiful, charming, with an absolutely amazing body, and he immediately decided that he had to have her. Their meeting lasted most of the morning, and he invited her to lunch. He was surprised that she agreed so easily, and even more surprised when, after dinner, she suggested that he take her to dinner that evening since her husband was out of town on business. They ended up returning to his hotel, and she gave him a night he would never forget. He started to describe what she did for him, but I interrupted him. "I don't need such details." "So, how often did you meet with Juliana?" I asked. "We met about 8 or 9 times. Every time her husband was away, she called me, and if I could find time to come here, I came. I've even canceled dates with my other girlfriends if she called. She's way better than any of them," he said with a grin. He got carried away with his story and for a moment forgot about his situation. He drank the rest of his beer and looked at the empty bottle. "Can I have one more?" he asked, pointing to the minibar. "Easy," I told him. "It would be a shame if I had to shoot you because of a misunderstanding." It seems like we've gotten a little closer. He chuckled again and walked over to get himself another beer. "Want?" he asked, and I shook my head. He returned to his seat. "So," I said, "you say that Juliana did all the steps. Do you know how often she did this?" "I don't think so, but I'm sure I'm not her first." There was no feeling of guilt. She wouldn't let me say anything bad about my husband, even though today I screwed up and called him an asshole and she tore me to pieces, he laughed. Otherwise, she would be here now. It seems strange that she would be upset about this, considering what she does, I said thoughtfully. She shares her life, he explained. In her understanding, Juliana, who is a loving wife to her husband, I don't even know his name, she refuses to talk about him, is not at all the Juliana who comes to have fun with me. She doesn't see anything reprehensible in this, since these are two different people. I'm not sure her husband will take it that way, I said. Mentally, she may feel like two different people, but physically they are one person. Peter winced and put his hand to his chest. Something happened? I asked carefully. Indigestion. I didn't eat, but the beer. He absent-mindedly rubbed his left hand, then began to choke. His face turned purple, and sweat began to roll off of him. He grabbed his chest with both hands. "Help me," he said. "Peter, look at me," I said. He raised his head. His eyes were frightened. He was out of breath, and I saw that he didn't have much time left. "You should have stayed away from Juliana," I said. "My wife's." His eyes widened for a moment, and then rolled back as he lost consciousness. It would take him another 10 or 15 minutes to die, and I used that time to make sure there was nothing in the room to indicate that anyone other than him was here. I turned on the TV, but quietly, and moved the food that housekeeping had brought in front of it. When his body is found, it turns out that he simply suffered a fatal heart attack while eating dinner and watching TV. Since he was already on blood pressure medication, I was confident that even if they did a full autopsy, they would find enough heart disease to explain the heart attack, especially since he was also taking Viagra, which is definitely taboo. I looked at him again to make sure he was, in fact, dead. Then, after checking that the hallway outside was clear, I hung a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the doorknob and returned to my room. The next day, when Juliana called me, it was already 5:30 p.m. "Hey, baby, how was your day?" she asked cheerfully. "Great," I said. "I have solved one of the unresolved issues, and I am confident that I can solve the last unresolved one. Listen, I got an idea. Since this is my last business trip, why don't we fly to Mexico for the weekend? I can pick you up at the airport, and we can celebrate the weekend, and maybe even turn it into a longer vacation. I'm sure you're due some time off, but even if you're not, just say you're going. It doesn't look like you need this job." I laughed. Juliana laughed too. "Sounds like a great idea. I'll talk to Barry tomorrow and see what he says. I'll call you tomorrow evening and we can book the tickets." "Great," I said. "So, what are you doing tonight?" "Everything is as before. I need to finish some work and I'll watch the series." I looked at the time, knowing that she thought she had dinner booked at 7, and it would take her at least 40 minutes to get there. "Listen, baby, the oven just beeped, so my dinner is ready. I'll talk to you tomorrow, okay?" she said. "Okay, enjoy your dinner and cheat," I said. "Bye, baby. Love you," she said. I hung up. At 8:30, I heard a knock on the door of Peter's room. From the moment I put up the "Do Not Disturb" sign, the maids had not come into the room, and I guessed that Juliana had come to the restaurant, waited, and came to find out why he was late. The knock was repeated. 20 minutes later, I heard the lock squeak, and the door opened. A hotel employee entered, followed by Juliana. When they saw Peter lying with his face buried in the frozen remains of last night's dinner, the employee rushed to him. Juliana stood in the doorway and watched what was happening. "He is dead?" she asked. The hotel worker took a pulse, but it was quite obvious that he was dead. His body was motionless. "Yes, he's dead." Without saying a word, Juliana turned and left the room. By the time the employee realized she was gone, she was already in the elevator and leaving the hotel. The police and ambulance were called, and, after rummaging around in the room for some time, they found his medications. Doctors concluded that he had suffered a fatal heart attack, given his state of health and the way they found him. Police spoke to a hotel employee who told them they entered the room at the request of a woman who had come to visit the man, and together they found him. He didn't know this woman, but when he saw her at the beginning of the week, she came to visit him. However, the man had been to the hotel before and had several female visitors. The employee thought they might be escorts, but didn't say anything because the man gave good tips and they weren't noticeable. After everyone left, I went and picked up my surveillance equipment, packed it up, and checked out of the hotel in the morning. In the parking lot, I removed the GPS tracker from Peter's car, which was still parked there. On Saturday morning, I picked up Juliana from the airport, and we went to the villa I had rented. She squealed with joy as she looked around and saw a private pool with sun loungers and said, "I'll go change clothes. Can we chat for a few minutes first?" "Jules?" I asked. She turned her head and looked at me. "You know I don't like it when you call me that," she said. "Why?" I asked. "You didn't seem to mind when Peter used that name." She turned pale, but decided to be bold. "Who is Peter?" "Do you know him?" "Peter, insurance agent. The one you've been having sex with for the past 4 months. The one you spent Monday night with when you said you were so tired you fell asleep and didn't call me," I said. "I don't know who you were talking to or what you heard, but—" she began. I put a 2025 photograph on the table between us. It was the same photo I took at the beginning, through the scope, of her lying on her back, her eyes wide. She sank into a chair. "Oh," she said. "About?" I asked. "Is that all you have?" "About?" She shrugged. "How long ago?" I asked. She looked at me evenly. "About 4 months. I take it he wasn't the first?" "Do you really want to do this?" she asked. "Do what? Find out the truth about your cheating wife? Insults? Seriously? Maybe you can find something original to call me and impress me. But before you start, there's something I'd like you to know." "And what?" "Why did I do this?" she said. I started to say that she did it because she... But then I stopped myself and let her know to continue. "We've been married for a long time, haven't we?" she asked. I nodded. "Can you tell me how many times a week on average we have sex?" she asked. I thought about it. "Well, with age it began to decline," I began, but she interrupted. "Really?" "Yes. At first we had sex every day, sometimes 2 or more times a day. But once we got over that teenage wildness, we started having sex at least once every 2 days, and sometimes more often. The sex was and still is great, and you are still the best lover I have ever had. But then you started going on a business trip, sometimes for a month. I'm used to getting sex almost every day, but here you expected me to go without it for weeks. One night I decided that since you are not here and I cannot get sex, I will go to the gym and relieve the tension. In the end, I went home with one of the men. I found a way to satisfy the need that you awakened in me. Oh yes, the next day I felt guilty. I was afraid that you would find out, that you would be hurt, and you would divorce me. When you returned from your trip, I practically raped you every day for a week, trying to make amends to you, to make amends for what you didn't even know about. Even then, I knew that the next time you left, everything would be the same. And so it happened. After some time, I decided to accept the new normal, but I needed to establish some precautions, so I created a few rules. First of all, I never did this when you were at home. Not because I thought you would catch me, but because you have always been my first and best lover. I didn't need anyone else if you were here. Secondly, I never brought anyone to our house. I would never disrespect you like that when there was another man in your bed. For the same reason, I have never allowed any of my other lovers to disrespect you. Some men seem to take pleasure in denigrating the husbands whose wives they have sex with. If any of them started talking bad about you, I stopped it. She refused to meet him again and even kicked some of them out of bed for this. Thirdly, I was regularly checked for sexually transmitted diseases. I didn't want to pass anything on to you. And before you say it, it's not just because I could get caught that way. I didn't want to put you at that risk. I also became convinced twice that I couldn't get pregnant. I used an IUD and had birth control implants. When we were ready to have children, I stopped it. I have copies of the children's DNA tests that you can review if you need proof. I knew that perhaps you would find out about this and question the relationship of the children. And yes, that means I did this the entire time we were together. You turned me on so much that I simply couldn't do without it. A day or two is still normal. But if it's more, then I needed at least some relief. That's all it was. I never had any feelings for any of them. The only man I have ever loved and been in love with is you. When you told me that this would be your last trip, I was overjoyed. I can finally stop looking for second-rate replacements. I won't need them, because I will always have the best one at home with me. My days of having to settle for second best will be over. It seems quite ironic that what may have been my last time with another man turned out to be the time I got caught. Your last time? I said. These photos were taken on Monday. You said you couldn't go more than 2 days without sex. So do you really want me to believe that you didn't go out on other nights? What about Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday? She laughed a little. He called me on Tuesday to say he was back at the hotel, but he started talking bad about you, so I told him it was over between us and I wouldn't date him again. A little later, he called back to apologize. I forgave him, but said that I was done with him for that night, and we would see him on Wednesday. He said that as an apology, he would invite me to dinner. So the call that came on Tuesday when we were talking, I asked, wasn't your mom? For the first time, she had the decency to look guilty. No, not her, she said quietly. I hated lying to you. Not enough not to do it, I said. Her eyes widened. Wait, you called me Jules on that call. I remember finding it strange. Did you know already then? She asked. The photographs were sent to me on Tuesday morning. They were accompanied by transcripts of previous calls. She sighed again. I'm so sorry you had to find out about this. It must have been terrible. Let's not go aside. You didn't see him on Tuesday, but what about the rest of the week? I asked. I wanted to know how his death affected her. He was supposed to meet me for dinner on Wednesday, she began. You mean when you were supposed to watch the series on TV? I asked with some irony. I actually watched it, and it's good. I just didn't look that evening. I was simply satisfying a physical need. For me, it was like going to lunch with a friend. I need to eat, and you're not around to keep me company, so I go with my friend. I know this may be hard for you to accept, but this is how I perceived, and to some extent still perceive what I did when I had sex with other men. And notice, I never said I was making love. I've never done this with anyone but you. You're stalling for time, I said categorically. Trying to avoid telling me what you did on Wednesday? Not at all, she said. As I already said, we were supposed to meet for dinner, but he never came. I sat in the restaurant for 45 minutes, and I must say I was furious. I've never been set up before. So I decided to go to his hotel. When I got there, he didn't open the door, but I knew he was at the hotel because his car was in the parking lot. I asked the manager to come inside, and we found him face down in a dinner steak, dead as a worm. According to the doctors, he was taking blood pressure medication, but this stupid fool was also taking Viagra, which you should never do. He probably had a massive heart attack. At least he didn't die while he was entertaining you, I said. It would be much more inconvenient. Oh, damn, I never thought about that, she said. It would definitely make a fuss. His poor wife would have found out about this. I think she already knew, I said. I suspect that it was she who sent me the photographs. Juliana nodded. At least I don't have to ask if you're going out with him again, I commented, and she smiled wryly. I won't apologize for what I did, she said. It was what I had to do. But I'm very sorry that I hurt you and that you found out about it. I was counting the days until you stopped going on business trips so that I wouldn't have to do this anymore. But I knew that as long as you went, this would continue. All I could do was minimize any consequences and hope that if you ever found out, your love for me would be strong enough for you to understand. Why didn't you come and talk to me? I asked. We could work something out. I could have done things differently, even taken you on trips with me. Deep down, I knew it was nonsense. I could never take her with me, but I needed to understand. I didn't want to be such a wife. A nitpicker who demands that you provide a high standard of living and then complain about how you do it. You love your job, and we have had a wonderful life together. I didn't plan to do it. I kind of fell into it, and by then it was too late to take it back. I looked at her for a long time, thinking. So, she said, what happens now? I stood up and went to the villa's kitchen and opened a bottle of wine, pouring each of us a glass and returning the bottle to the table. I handed the glass to Juliana and sat wearily in a chair, drinking half of it in one gulp. "I don't know," I said. "You just need to think about it carefully. We've been together for so long, and I thought you loved me as much as I loved you. Yes, we had a great sex life, and yes, we had sex often. But you weren't the only one who suffered when I left. I also went without sex for weeks and even months. Yes, I have had opportunities to have lunch with other women while I was away, but I never did it, remaining true to our vows. I don't understand how you can be so absorbed in your need that you're ready to betray everything we have together, or promises, our vows. For what? Just for sex. Are you going to claim sex addiction? Do we need you to see a psychologist?" She opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. "Please, I gave you permission to speak, but at least do me the courtesy of listening to me for a while." I leaned over and filled her glass and then filled mine. "I have so many questions. How can you separate sex and love so easily? I always believed that men did this, not women, that women needed love to have good sex. And if this is true, and you are not lying about the fact that there was no love, then this means that you risked everything for the sake of bad sex. How do you think I feel? You also said that you can't go without sex for more than a couple of days in a row. What will happen with age? It is well known that men's sex drive slows down as they age, and some women's sex drive increases with age. Is this what I should expect? Am I going to come home to find some young boy in our bed because that won't be enough for you? How can I look at myself in the mirror every morning with any semblance of respect, knowing that our entire married life, you have been cuckolding me with other men? There have been dozens, if not hundreds of them over the years. Besides, you say you've been getting tested regularly, but what's the point? You could become infected and pass on the infection even before the test results come back. You could have given me anything, even HIV. You could have killed us both. Where would our children be then? Her face twitched, and she absent-mindedly rubbed her left arm. I smiled softly at her. Peter was a piece of shit, I said. But I think he eventually developed feelings for you. He told me that he even canceled meetings with other lovers when you called and said that you were free. What? She said. When did you talk to Peter? Oh, we talked a little on the evening of his death. You see, I was a little upset to see you having sex with that creep, and decided to make sure it didn't happen again. Now her face was flushed, and I could see pain brewing in her chest. What did you do with him? She asked. The same thing I just did to you, I growled. I killed this traitor. Say hi for me when you get to hell. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.